Welcome to After COVID-19, Will Food Shopping Ever Be the Same? With Professor of Food Marketing at St. Joseph's University's Haub School of Business, Dr. John L. Stanton. Today is Monday, April 6th, and it is 12 p.m. I'm Emily Advani from the class of 2007 and master's class of 2008, and I have the distinct pleasure of hosting today's event. First and foremost, I hope everyone and their loved ones are well during this unprecedented time. I want to take a moment to extend a sincere thank you to all of our medical professionals, grocery store workers, postal and delivery workers, restaurant workers, farmers, really anyone who can't stay home or who isn't staying home in order to help us all get through this uncertain time. All those on the front lines of this COVID-19 pandemic. We will be forever indebted to you for your sacrifice and your service. Also, thank you to St. Joseph's University for coordinating this Unlimited Learning webinar series, an opportunity to engage with university experts and cutting-edge content through virtual events, something that it seems like we all truly need now more than ever. And a special thank you to Dr. Stanton for joining us to provide insight on such a fascinating and relevant topic. Dr. Stanton has a Ph.D. in quantitative methods and marketing from Syracuse University, one of my alma maters as well, and has been in the food industry for about 40 years. He has been vice president for marketing for Melita, an international coffee company, and worked in Germany for Tangelmann, one of the world's largest food retailers. He's currently a professor and previously endowed chair in the food marketing department at St. Joseph's University, where he's been working and teaching since 1984. Dr. Stanton was elected to the European Retail Academy Hall of Fame and the Private Label Manufacturers Hall of Fame. Dr. Stanton was also director of research at an advertising agency and has consulted for many nationally known food companies, including Campbell Soup Company, Procter & Gamble, Acme, Kroger, Pepsi, Frito-Lay, Florida Department of Citrus, Kellogg, and others. He has published over 60 academic articles, including in the Journal of Marketing Research and Science. He has been on the board of directors or advisors for a number of prominent food companies, including Frankfurt Candy Company, Hers Foods, Premio Foods, and the Philadelphia Cheesesteak Company. He currently serves on the board of directors of T-Pro. Dr. Stanton has appeared on national TV such as CNN and has been quoted in many business magazines, including Fortune. Welcome, John. That's a long introduction for you. You got a lot of credentials.
Thank you, thank you. It sounds like I couldn't keep a job.
Well, I'm just gonna jump right into it because I'm sure everybody wants to get started. It's hard for, I think, a lot of us to get those apocalyptic images out of our minds of the empty shelves and the crowds of people lining grocery stores. Before we delve into exploring what's happening inside the food industry during this global pandemic, I'd like to get your thoughts on what is going on in terms of consumer behavior.
Sure. I think the first point to make is that food shopping and grocery shopping pretty much is a habit. When people go shopping, they're not really looking at labels for products that they've bought for years at a time. They're going through and they're picking things up, and where they shop tends to be a habit, and what they buy tends to be a habit. And what we're seeing then is this virus is causing people and grocery stores and manufacturers to break habits. And I think that's really what the key piece to this. And the thing that the food industry is most interested in is how many of those broken habits will continue after this pandemic is over, which we all hope is soon.
Yes. Well, and speaking of habits, I don't know if people habitually hoard toilet paper. So I think a big question on everybody's mind is, why is toilet paper so hard to find? We don't normally hoard that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is a funny scenario. And let me give a little broader context if I can.
Sure.
One of the reasons why the U.S. food and, consumer products are really so cheap relative to the rest of the world is the food industry has been able to forecast very accurately the demand for many of the foods and the paper products and things of that nature. And they try and produce the absolute minimum to keep those stores fully stocked. Well, what's happened is, for reasons which are unknown to me, people seem to think toilet paper is essential for a respiratory disease. But in any case, because this machinery, this supply chain is so focused on the demand and understanding demand that when something happens that just totally changes the demand, well, the supply has to catch up. The distribution system has to catch up. We got plenty of toilet paper in America. It just doesn't happen to be on the shelves. And the same thing with the various canned foods. They could produce many, many, many times more. But the refinement of the supply chain means that it takes them a little while now to adjust to this unexpected demand.
Now, with the shift in demand, does the timeline on when we're going to be seeing products like toilet paper and the other products that seem to be, going off the shelves, they went off the shelves during that initial panic, does it depend on the product with the timeline to get those things now to market? Does it depend on the product, that there's different timelines for different products?
Yeah, there will be different timelines for different products. And keep in mind that this is also exacerbated by the fact that some of the truck drivers are probably getting sick or being careful, or there's fewer people out there. So if it was just under normal a normal problem, you might be able to get the products on the shelf faster. But given that this is affecting the supply chain employees as well, it might. But paper probably would be on the shelf faster than canned food, for example. We're not seeing that much of a change in fresh produce. That seems to be still pretty much in stock. And that's probably because people are stocking up on non-perishables, canned products, and things like that. If you don't stock up on perishable because they're clearly going to go bad. And I think that one of the issues is why are people stocking up? I mean, they're not closing the stores. The toilet paper plants aren't being closed, etc. It's not like if you have a terrible storm and the factories can't work. But I think what happens, Emily, is people want to feel as if they're doing something to protect themselves. They want to take some action, even if that action doesn't really make great sense. It's kind of like, I was thinking about this when I was in grammar school. We had to practice duck and cover, get under the desk. And I thought to myself, did anyone really think that my desk was going to protect me from a nuclear bomb? The answer is no. But it felt like we were taking some action of our own to protect ourselves. And I believe a lot of this stocking up is, what can I do? We're seeing, for example, that household items are up about 50%, which would include, by the way, the toilet paper, etc. But if we look at groceries are only up about 29%. And produce is not really up that much. But what's really interesting is the number of actual trips to the grocery store are up. That kind of surprised me.
Well, that's the one thing I was about to say, that, you know, maybe we feel like we're protecting ourselves by not going as much. But from my own personal experience, my husband has been to the grocery store more in the last 3 weeks than the entire time I've known him. And like you said, you feel like you're possibly protecting your family by making sure you're stocked up. But then it's sort of this ripple effect where we keep going back thinking we don't have enough of a certain thing, things that we don't normally buy. Like you said, you can't stock up on the fresh produce. And I think that sort of, then we're buying things that are outside of our habits, which is what you alluded to in the beginning of the conversation, that change in just the everyday consumer habits is now affecting the supply chain and how we're getting our stuff out there. My husband even said that the last trip he took a few days ago, things were really well stocked, except those household items like toilet paper and cleaners. But pretty much everything else that we normally buy was easy to find.
I was talking to a grocery store owner the other day, and they said that it just caught them a little bit by surprise at how quickly everything would be taken off the shelves, and that, you know, just using the existing labor, et cetera, they were able to get everything, you know, pretty much back in stock. I think within a week, the grocery stores will look identical as they did within a month ago.
That's reassuring. But speaking of changes in consumer behavior, have we seen a change in home delivery, ordering groceries, something that perhaps people were slow to take to because they were used to that weekly grocery store trip? Have we seen changes there?
A lot of changes there. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, the reticent to change often requires some kind of an incentive, you know, to do something different. And some of the areas that we're seeing consumers change are because of this problem. For example, there are a lot more people using the online grocers. They may have thought that, you know, it might have been a good idea, but they just never tried it because they were quite content going to the store and they didn't really see the reason to do it. But actually, the online ordering is up 16%, and first-time ordering is 26% of all the orders. Wow. So we're really getting a lot more new people that have kind of been forced, or they feel forced, to start using that online ordering. Now the question is, how many of those people will continue to do so? I believe that a lot more will will continue it, because they realize it's not such a difficult thing to do. And there are a lot of things that they buy at the grocery store and, you know, they just walk by and hardly even notice, just put it in their basket. It doesn't require their attention. It doesn't require them really to worry about these things. That's what they're going to start buying online. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see, that'll be something that'll be a residual of this effect. We're going to see the online ordering is going to be around for a while. We knew eventually it was going to increase, but I think it's going to be going faster now. Another interesting phenomenon is that people are starting to cook again. That it's not so easy to just run out and buy tonight's meal. You know, a lot of busy, primarily women, hadn't made their mind up for dinner until the drive home. Mm-hmm. And many times they would, I can tell by that smile, you might be one of them.
Absolutely.
And they can't do that anymore. So they're forced to plan a little bit more what their meals are going to be. And guess what? They're enjoying the cooking process. That this was something something that is really likely to come back. People didn't cook. People didn't avoid cooking because they hated it. They were just so busy. And it was easier to just make a quick stop. And I have to be honest, it was really difficult, primarily for women. Originally, before we had the women being emancipated back in the 70s, they had to stay at home, cook the meals, take care of the house, and take care of the children. But today is different. Women can go to work and come home and take care of the kids and do the shopping and make the dinner. I mean, basically what we did is just made it more difficult for women by having the go to work all the time. And they have reacted beautifully by changing the process of how meals take place. And we're going back now to more people cooking at home, which, by the way, leads to another industry that's growing a little bit during this, which is the meal kits.
Yes.
The blue aprons and those types of meals. We're seeing that more people are buying those. They feel safer with those. It helps them to learn a little bit more about cooking, and sales are up of those. Now, that remains to be seen about how much that will continue afterwards, because the history of these is that people use them for a few months, and then they begin to drop off a little bit, primarily because it's not an inexpensive way to do it.
Well, you got a few brownie points in my book, admitting that things aren't always easy at home, being a caretaker and working. So, but I'm definitely that person that was driving home from work or wherever I was, and grabbing that pre-made meal that you could possibly just put in the oven. My kids for the last 3 weeks have been asking for pot pie, because they would get the pre-made pot pies from McCafferty's and just pop them in the oven. And I said, well, we don't have those right now, and I'm not really sure I know how to make a pot pie. But that is definitely something that has changed. I know I can see in our family that, making sure that we're cooking all of our meals, and the convenience of even just doing the grab and go or the takeout has sort of, it's shifted. Speaking of shifts in behavior, is there any indication about buying local? I know I have the good fortune of living near a lot of local farmers markets that are still open, but practicing social distancing. In theory, I could go down the road and grab my eggs from a local farm. Is there any information on how people behaving in terms of maybe switching to hyper-local over going to the grocery store?
I haven't read anything about that as it pertains to this virus situation. I will say this: we've done a lot of research, especially in the area of dairy and some other typical Pennsylvania products. And probably the single most influential claim that you can make on a product is local. And we did some focus groups, some interviewing, like, why would that be? And consumers feel that their local farmers, their local producers are not going to do anything that hurts them, that they really trust them. And, they don't know whether or not to trust something that's coming in from Peru or Mexico or even Florida for that matter. So local is really highly valued. I would think that, people would look more for local produce. And if you've seen in the supermarkets, Emily, they really tend to make a big deal of the products that are, in fact, from local farmers. If you go to a Wegmans or a Whole Foods, they usually have pictures of the farmers. They usually tell you where they live. I mean, it's a big thing. You know, I think there's nothing better than locally produced produce. And my guess is it might not be as high, just people practicing staying at home and staying away. I know that the local produce markets are doing everything they can to, you know, with the gloves and the masks and doing everything to make people feel safe there. But I think that locals are a really important attribute, to say the least.
Now, during the 2008 economic crisis, we saw a number of changes in habits, and some sort of returned to their previous stature. You know, I know you mentioned a shift in moving away from organics to back, you know, because of the price of that, but then people slowly moving back to that. Do you see things that are changing now, that sort of, what are the top things that we feel like may go back to normal once we feel all settled with where we are in terms of this health crisis?
Well, you know, you bring up a really interesting example from the organics from the 2008 financial problems. In every product category, there's something we call people on the margin. That is, if we think about organics, there were people out there who absolutely were going to buy organics regardless of the cost. And there were people out there that just weren't going to bother buying organics. But you had this group of people on the margin that they said, you know, it's not spending that much more for the product. It certainly isn't going to hurt us or whatever. And those people, when the price changed, went back to buying the non-organic product. My guess is that there will be some return of those people that were on the margin. That is, they really didn't want to shop online. They really didn't need that extra time. And frankly, they like walking through the store and looking at the meat and doing all of these kinds of things. They probably will not continue to be a major online ordering person for food. But there will be those people on the margin the other way that'll say, you know, I just thought it would be really complicated. I thought it would really, I didn't know what the products would be like they would send me. And everything else seemed to be fairly easy for them, and they're going to continue to do that. So even though we're seeing, you know, about 26% new orders coming up, 13% increase, I think if we had 10% to continue to be new, that's billions of extra dollars for the food industry. We don't have to have 80% and those kinds of things.
What do you see as some of the areas that will be effective sort of on the more negative end for the long term? Parts of the supply chain, growers, farmers. Are there areas where you think that there may be a longer term negative effect even when we sort of get back to quote unquote status quo?
Well, that's a good question. The food industry in general will be a little out of sorts because they've relied so heavily on using this software, the computers, to absolutely predict the optimal shipping numbers, etc. And so my guess is we're going to see, number one, some products may be undersupplied. And there'll be other products that'll be on sale because they produce too many. You know, it's kind of like if you're watching and the sales are going up and down, some of the people are going to miss the where they should be. But I think in the long run, it's going to, you know, smooth out again, and the supply chain will catch up. Now, there are some interesting changes that are taking place in how people pick products. For example, private label products, and I'm sure you know product label products are the ones that are store brands. You know, locally, ShopRite just changed their private label brand, etc. And for many, many years, people thought of these private label products as just cheap substitutes, or sometimes they called them generics. Do you remember when they called them generics?
Yes.
Well, the private label industry has been working very hard in order to make their store-owned brands as good as national brands. And if you think about something like Costco, who has their own private label product, they're superior products. Kirkland, they're superior products. But there's still this resistance. Remember, I said people don't like to change. So there's an awful lot of people who would go in and pick up Campbell soup and wouldn't think twice about it. And they wanted Campbell tomato soup, etc. But when they got there, it wasn't available. And so they picked up the private label product. They got home and they tried it. They said, hey, this isn't so bad at all. I wonder why I never did this before. And so we're actually seeing that private label is growing significantly during this time. And I think that that's going to continue. That'll be one of the things that'll continue.
Are there things, you know, I find it fascinating that there's been areas of growth during all of this, which I think is a positive sign for those invested in those areas. Who was hit the hardest, you know, in the immediate term? Were there areas of the store that were just hit really hard and they're sort of struggling to get themselves back on track?
Well, there's two different types of purchase. Go back to the toilet paper. You know, that the usage, not the purchase, the usage of toilet paper is not going to change much. And so people are going to have all this storehouse of toilet paper and they won't be buying it for a long time. But there's other categories, let's just say like potato chips. Let's take Hers potato chips. When you buy a whole bunch of snacks, and snacks, by the way, are way up, you get these at home, and what do? It's not like toilet paper. You eat. Someone asked me, Emily, someone asked me, what size of bag of potato chips is a single serving? I said, whatever size bag I'm currently eating.
I'm in that boat too.
And I think what you see happen then is the potato chip industry, when this is over, they're going to be in the same position. There's not going to be any backroom storage of potato chips. They're going to be eaten. So they're under a little more pressure to keep that going. I think part of the fun after this is over is going to be looking for sales, because I think a lot of companies have, you know, really ramped everything up and they started things going, and then as things become a little more normal, we're going to see that maybe there's a little over inventory and we'll see some sales.
I'll definitely look out for those once I'm the one making the treks back to the grocery store.
Right.
Now, I could ask you questions all day. I have plenty, but I'd really be interested in hearing from our participants today. So now we'd like to move to grabbing some questions from our audience members. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you'd like to submit a question, just go ahead and use the chat feature. And if you can, when you submit your question, please include your name, the city where you're located, and your class year if you are an alumnus of St. Joseph's University. And I'm going to be having my colleague Megan toss those out. So let's get started with some questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to ask, though, if don't make them too hard for me.
Well, this question comes from a listener named Megan, who says, prior to this crisis, grocery sales for items like dairy milk were declining. During the crisis, dairy milk sales have risen dramatically in the retail space. Do you think there will be any carryover effect where people coming back to products like milk during the crisis will remain stronger afterwards?
Well, that's a really, really good question. You know, the dairy industry, the milk industry has been suffering for a long time for a lot of reasons that's not their fault and a lot of reasons that are their fault. I think it will get a rejuvenation. I don't think it will ever go back to the kind of levels that we had 20 years ago. I believe that just having the family home together, I think maybe eating some homemade kind of snacks that go perfect with a glass of milk. But here's the most important thing. Being home, not needing to run out in the morning means cereal for breakfast. And probably the biggest loss in the milk industry was people skipping breakfast, skipping cereal, and therefore skipping milk. But I think we'll see a little uptake as the habit of having breakfast and having cereal may last for a little while longer.
That's interesting. I definitely have been eating more cereal than I have in a long time during this. Megan, another question from our audience.
Yes, we have a question from Tony from the class of 1997, who wants to know what will be the long-term effect for open bar departments such as salad, Asian bars, hot food, etc.
You know, I thought I asked for easy questions. I think we're going to continue to see those. I think maybe the sales in those departments may be a little bit slower in coming back. You know, there were just some horrible stories of people intentionally, you know, coughing on these things, etc. For the most part, American consumers are good people. They don't intentionally try to hurt people. You may see a little bit of resistance at first, but they are so popular. They're so focused on what today's modern family needs, which is both prepared meals and meals that they can bring home. There's variety. You can actually very simply have 3 or 4 different entrees for family members that everyone doesn't want the same thing. So they'll make a comeback, I'm quite sure, but it just may be a little slower as some of the people remember those disgusting individuals that have created problems with that.
Megan, I see a lot more coming in. Feel free to toss
Yes, it's getting very busy. Mike from the class of 2004 asks, are you worried about the food service industry and what restaurants in particular might be in the most trouble?
I am really worried for the food service industry. Not that they won't be able to make a comeback, but clearly of all the food segments, the restaurants are getting hammered. And it's the employees, the waitresses, the cooks, the busboys, all of those things. They are the ones that are really paying the highest price. You know, there's no doubt that restaurants and food service will come back. We may lose a lot of the independents, but I think we'll see them come back. But right in the midst of this, they're really the ones that are suffering the most.
And Megan, another one.
Yes, Ryan from the class of 2016 asks, I've seen on social media an increase of posts about people eating while in quarantine due to being bored, and exercise and working out trends have decreased with gyms being closed. How will, quote, healthy eating trends change when the quarantine is lifted?
Well, I have to be honest with you. I never describe food as being healthy or unhealthy. It's consumers that are healthy or unhealthy. I think we're going to see gym membership up. There's no question that just sitting around the house leads to a little bit of boring eating. I saw someone had a sign inside the refrigerator. So when you open the refrigerator door, it said, "You're not hungry, you're just bored. Shut the door." But I think that, I think this is so temporary that if some people gain 5 pounds or so, they're going to make a heck of an effort to get it down, and they'll eat more appropriately.
Okay, we do have another question here. Sarah from the class of 2009 asks, do you believe this pandemic will further consolidate the power of retailers such as Costco, Walmart, and Amazon?
Yes. Yeah, unequivocally yes. Because this consolidation has been going on for the last 10 years. And clearly the retailers that will be hurt the most will be these independent retailers. They were already, many of them on the fringes of staying in business. And so we will see probably more consolidation. Consolidation is not necessarily bad as long as you can have 3 or 4 major competitors in a market. If you look at the Philadelphia market, it's a wonderful grocery market. We have chains like Wegmans and Whole Foods, and we have Acme, and we have ShopRite, and even though these are all big chains, they're competing against each other, and no one is going to get totally out of line because we have that pressure. But I think consolidation will continue. It's pretty hard to be an independent grocer today and compete against these massive, giant supermarket chains.
And another one, Megan.
Okay.
Lots of good stuff.
Yes, so many questions.
Really fascinating stuff.
Yes, let me see. We have Jose asking, what advice or recommendations do you have for emerging natural food CPG brands to make the best of the current environment and come out on top?
Well, I'm not sure that the merging of these brands necessarily is going to have will be affected by this. The merging process is just put on hold temporarily. There's too much taking place in a business today, trying to get the whole supply chain in order, making sure that they can get raw ingredients, all of these things, so that management time is pretty much directed to today versus the merging of products and things of that nature. However, the question I think is really interesting, because once everything settles down, all of this pent up ideas and all of these pent up plans to buy and sell and merge and whatever probably is going to be happen fast and happen big.
That's
Thank you. We do have a question from Kate, who's asking about the beverage side of the business. And do you foresee the premium trends in that area coming back on the beverage side once we're through the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't think in the long run the beverage category is going to change that much. I think the fact that a lot of people are buying beverage products, different types of beverage products, in convenience stores. Now, I didn't mention, by the way, convenience store sales tend to be down simply because people are planning more. A lot of the food in convenience stores were often the stuff people were picking up on the way home in order to make dinner that night. And since there's more planning taking place, those sales are down a little bit. I don't see beverage in general, maybe alcohol a little bit as one gets a little too bored. I'm just kidding about that. I don't know if that's true. But I don't think the beverage category will be hurt any more than any of the other categories.
Okay, thank you. Daniel from the class of 2014 says, with Amazon, Target, Safeway, etc., offering temporary wage increases, what impact do you foresee COVID-19 having on the minimum wage discussion in the long term?
It's going to speed that discussion up. You know, the big retailers like that have argued they really can't stay in business if they pay their employees more. And most of their argument was based on some assumption of what the future would be like. But lo and behold, they are paying their employees more. They are doing this stuff. And I think that they will kind of lose a little bit of that argument that, oh my gosh, we can't possibly pay our people more because it will be bankrupt. Well, they're not bankrupt. They're actually making money, and they are actually paying people more. So I expect to see the minimum wage go up.
Okay. A timely question. Ricardo asks, how will Easter holiday sales be impacted?
I was just asked that question yesterday, and obviously with Easter coming up, it's going to be devastating. I think there'll be a lot less candy and those kinds of products purchased. That will hurt the chocolate and the candy industry because they sell vastly more product during holidays. Obviously, Halloween is first, but I think Easter might be second. I think people will still try to enjoy the holiday and preserve some of their traditions, but it'll be minimal. And I think we'll see those confectionery companies kind of suffer a little bit on this. Then next year, presumably when Easter comes, everyone will be digging in.
Very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Marianne from classes of 96 and a grad degree in 06 asks, do you anticipate customers' ordering habits shifting to where they would not like to order via kiosk or touchscreen in the store, or paying versus card versus paying in cash?
That's right. I wondered about that. I don't know the answer to that, and I apologize for that. I know that a lot of places around where I live in South Jersey, they want to use the credit cards where you put it in yourself and not the slide bar or whatever they use. But that's a really interesting question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but unfortunately I don't. I did ask, make them easy questions. But,
All right, how about this one? We'll try this one. Let's see. Many retailers are cutting promotions and sales on categories that do not seem to need this activity right now. Will there be any long-term implications to how retailers promote? That comes from Mike.
Yeah, I think probably not. I think what's going to happen, the whole technology of planning in-store promotions and sales and putting things on end caps is a very technical and analytic process. And I think what's going to happen is when this whole thing starts to tail off, the whole virus thing, we're going to see all these computer models trying to be readjusted for the second time, and we'll see some surprising sales in the beginning to get back onto track. But I think within as little as 6 months, the things that used to be on sale regularly will be back on sale regularly, and we'll still have the coupons and the various deals that they make. They work. You know, the reason why someone says, why do they keep giving all these coupons and rebates, etc.? And the answer is because they work. Because people buy more when they see these kinds of events, sales events. And so I think we're going to see just as many in roughly the same categories, but we'll have a little bit of a frenzy in the beginning with some things on sale to get the supply chain back in cycle.
Okay, another question that came in says, do you feel after we return to some time of normal that people will try to be better prepared for the future in reference to food supplies in the home?
No, I don't. I think that at least most American consumers have a fairly short planning horizon. Now, there are still people that are, have bomb shelters, etc. But if you look at the number of people, that worry about what's going to happen 10 years from now, or will this happen again? I think, thankfully, American consumers enjoy the time that they have. And they'll get back to pretty much the way they were before. Conservatives will continue to be conservative with their purchasing, and people that like to try new things, etc., will probably continue to try new things.
Okay, this question's a little bit different. This comes from Joseph in the class of 08 and 2013. How will this impact CPG packaging, that is, something like self-serve fresh produce where there is none currently? And how do manufacturers provide consumers more confidence in their products via the packaging?
Well, packaging is a hot area today in the whole food business. And in the produce side, we're seeing more branded packaging, more branded produce, where companies, the way they branded soup or the way they branded toilet paper, we're going to start seeing more and more of that in the produce side. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a little more packaging. You can't just really throw all the lettuce on the shelf and then say, oh, this is Dole's lettuce. I think that if we look at, for example, the packaged salads, they've just grown beyond what anyone could have imagined. Matter of fact, it's funny. I find that some younger people, of course, at my age, everybody's younger, but if we look, they don't recognize the word lettuce. They think it's salad. They call it salad because so much of lettuce is purchased in the form of one of these bagged salads. I think we'll see more try to have sustainable packaging. I think we'll see more environmentally friendly packaging. I think we'll see changes in packaging in that produce side, but mostly I believe for the brand, so people can brand their produce.
Okay, I think we still have time for a couple of questions. One that just came in from Lewis, class of 2018. He says, assuming we live with some form of social distancing for a year or more, what role will restaurants play, and how will the trend of eating away from home be affected?
I sure pray that it's not going to be social distancing for the next year. But if we accept that assumption, I think that the restaurant business is going to suffer significantly. I think if that happens, they'll try to do what the airline is doing is, you're going to have the tables, separately. But frankly, I don't think I would like going to a restaurant where the waitress is wearing surgical gloves and masks. It kind of takes a little something away from the intimacy of going out to dinner. But to answer the question, let's, more than anything else, pray we get this virus over with before a year. If it's not, the restaurant industry is in big trouble.
Megan, how about one more from our audience?
Okay, let me see. One more. Do you think this incredible surge in retail business will eliminate some smaller manufacturers that can't keep up with demand and will be in out of stock situation versus larger competition with multiple manufacturing facilities?
Well, these are really good questions. These are excellent questions. I think that the real challenge of all manufacturers is going to be to continue to keep the supply of their products on the shelf. Now, I don't want to get into the financial planning of this, but if you have a small business and someone says, we need to have you produce more, well, they have to have the financial capital, to buy the raw ingredients, to buy the packaging, to buy the bottles or the cans, etc. And many of these companies won't be able to keep up beyond what they're already planned for, simply because of the capital requirements it takes to do this. There's no question they'll try and they'll do everything humanly possible, but this is an advantage. I will say this: this is an advantage for the large, well-financed food businesses that have the ability to go from first gear to second gear to third gear. Some of these smaller companies are already working at full optimization.
Well, and John, it sounds like from a lot of these questions, we're seeing areas, like a lot of industries, where there, during a crisis, could be innovation and swift changes on things that have maybe been in the works for some time, like packaging, changes in packaging, like minimum wage increases. And then there's also going to be areas where there's going to be struggle and recovery, local grocers, restaurants. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye out on all those areas to see where innovation comes quickly, and also those that will need an extra boost in order to recover. Before we leave all our participants today, are there any final thoughts on this topic that you would like to leave us with?
I think that people should not be worried about the food supply. I don't think people should be concerned about, will everything come back to normal? We'll come back to new normal. But all the things that we have expected, I think you can expect that they continue. I think that you may be, consumers out there, surprised that they're going to do a few things differently. That they may be buying a little more private label. That they might once in a while order online. But I hate to think I'm wearing rose-colored glasses, but I'm optimistic about the future. I think that if you look at what's happening, you're going to see that the food industry, from manufacturer to retailer, has gotten through this terrible situation, leaving consumers reasonably unscathed and prepared to go back to normal as soon as this is over.
Well, John, I have to say, I appreciate the ending on a positive, optimistic note. We don't hear that everywhere all the time right now, but having a vote of confidence in an area that affects so many of our lives, the grocer, our products, and being able to have the luxury of having those products in our home. I'm glad to end on an optimistic note. I want to thank Dr. Stanton again for lending your insights and expertise to today's conversation. Absolutely fascinating. I'd also like to thank St. Joseph's University for hosting today's event, and to the advancement and marketing teams for coordinating. Again, this session was recorded today and will be posted on the Unlimited Learning Series website. Make sure to share it, and also look out for future webinars in this series. You can find them at www.sju.edu/unlimited-learning. We really hope you will join us again for future sessions. Lastly, as we conclude, we will be posting up a very brief poll. If you'd like to share your thoughts, they're truly invaluable to us in moving forward on this series. And again, I'm Emily Bonney from the class of 2007, master's class 2008, and we really look forward to next time and hope you will join us again. Everybody out there, please stay well and stay safe.
Thank you. It was fun to talk with you, Emily, and with everyone else.